my name's Dead Palette, and you and I are going to read and react to a creepypasta about Futurama. So this story is entitled Not Long Enough, and I think that is referring to Fry from Futurama not being frozen long enough. I'm going to read the story, assuming that you have seen like an episode of Futurama and just know the general premise. But this story comes with high acclaim because it's written by K.I. Simpson, the person who wrote Dead Bart. I am a huge fan of Dead Bart. It is by no means a perfect story, but I just absolutely love Dead Bart. So hopefully the story lives up to that legacy of Dead Bart. Let's see. Until recently, it was thought that Matt Groening had completely recovered from whatever was making him act so strangely during the Dead Bart incident, and that it had affected his normal life afterwards. Recent claims from the employee who found the Dead Bart video, however, indicate that Matt Groening went through another similar incident 10 years ago. It was the summer of 1999, and Futurama had recently premiered. So, Matt Groening is the creator of Futurama and The Simpsons and some other shows. We're alluding to the Dead Bart incident. This is part of the Dead Bart canon, if you will, and is a continuation of it. We're also being told that, Matt Groening, the employee, found the Dead Bart video, which is interesting because in the original Dead Bart, a fan found the video, and in my rewrite, it is actually an employee of Fox who finds the video. So, I wonder if I don't know when this was written. Did K.I. Simpson go off of my rewrite? Am I crazy? Am I Matt Groening? Am I raising my voice in the way to make it sound as though I'm asking a question? Theory? Matt was working on 2 shows now and had started showing signs of stress when he announced that he was working on another episode that would be 100% his own writing. This terrified some of the staff who worked on both shows, but they were hesitant to bring up Dead Bart, and the Futurama crew saw no reason to reject Matt's idea. An early version of it was made, and the employee who found Dead Bart managed to make a digital copy of this as well. The episode was called Not Long Enough. So, it's again alluding to, something very morbid, person being frozen, having their whole life and situation be stripped from them. The whole idea that he's showing signs of stress again, that's good. I think that the interesting thing is the writers actually showing the stress, kind of reflecting real life, what it's like to be on an animation team, and all the stressors that go along with that. I think that if the story focuses on that, then it'll be successful. The episode started with Fry, Leela, and Bender making a delivery for Planet Express. They never revealed exactly what they were delivering or where they were going, and everyone seemed to be upset about an unexplained event that had happened recently. Leela and Bender were angry at Fry, who kept apologizing, but it was coldly rejected by his friends. They eventually reached a planet that seemed to have only one house, surrounded by empty, desolate fields on all sides. They locked the door to a grotesque alien that seemed to be very old. They knocked on the door, and a grotesque alien that seemed to be very old answered. He took the box without a word. He opened it, took out a knife, and stabbed himself. So that in upon itself, if you've ever seen Futurama, is not too, it's a little weird, but it's not too bizarre for it in terms of, man, there was just something weird culturally going on this planet. So they're making a delivery. That's what they do. They deliver packages. That's all within character. They never exactly reveal what they're upset about, what unexplained incident they're upset about, and I kind of want that to be elaborated on, what they mean by that. Like, they're upset about something, but it just isn't discussed in the plot what's going on. Like, maybe it was in a past episode. Maybe this is like a two-parter or something. And then we also have the question of how are we getting our hands on this episode? Or is this being written and it's not actually produced? What's going on here? Where are we? What's the source? We need the receipts. The Planet Express crew did not seem to find this odd or surprising. They simply left the body on the ground and walked back to their ship in silence. Again, not too strange. It's just like, that happened. I could see this definitely being played for laughs. The next scene was of the Planet Express ship flying through space. A dissonant piece of music made of extremely loud instruments playing a very slow tune played in the background while the ship flew around an empty black space. They finally reached Earth and landed on a deserted New York. Fry stated, apologizing again, that as they walked through the empty streets, there were no signs of the Planet Express building. But Leela and Bender glared at him in silence. Fry gave up and separated from his friends. He walked for quite a while, never encountering a single person. He reached the cryogenics building where he had been frozen, looked inside, and began to cry. I'm going to pause right there and talk about New York being completely deserted, which is not being explained. So this is going back into the very surreal territory that you see in Dead Bart, but I think the parts of it in Dead Bart were grounded better, because there's no explanation as to why everyone has deserted New York, and I'm going to need some sort of justification. Doesn't need to be a concrete reason, but I need there to be some sort of theory crafting that can be done, some place for my mind to wander to come up with an explanation as to why New York is empty, because that's a very creepy image. Just everyone abandoning New York or vanishing. But there needs to be some sort of explanation for that effect. Effects in a story, creepy effects like that can't just happen and have no reason. Especially very over the top ones like people disappearing en masse, right? But then the crying began. The crying went on for a few minutes before he entered the building. Fry went to one of the tubes, set the timer on it to a huge number with more zeros than I could count, and locked himself in. So, more numbers than I could count. That tells us that the person writing this has seen the episode, and they're describing it as seeing it, so it's not written down. Or it could be, I guess. But it seems to imply that the episode was actually produced and made, at least to some degree. And our narrator has seen this episode. The screen faded out, and when it came back, in the view was entirely on Fry. So it's, pushed up onto Fry. The machine must have partially stopped working, as parts of Fry were decaying. Bone was poking through his skin in several places. Fry mumbled, "It's what I deserve," and climbed out of the freezing device. So he's like kind of half dead from being frozen. That's a pretty interesting effect. Very morose, very surreal, very Simpsons vaporwave kind of feel of weird depression. So what we're getting is that Fry in some way was responsible for whatever caused everyone in New York to disappear. And I wonder if that's supposed to be like an Earth-wide thing or what. It was a surreal, indescribable place. There were huge varieties of shapes and colors, but it wasn't very bright or fanciful. It was closer to the faint colors you see if you squint your eyes too hard. So I think that this story is kind of going back to the well a second time, if that makes any sense. Kind of just pulling on whatever bits of information were successful from Dead Bart. The squinting your eyes, the description of shapes and colors, the vaguities, if that makes any sense, if that's a word, rather. Fry started walking. The surreal void he was in seemed to go on and on. We use the word surreal twice there. I'm not a fan of that. He kept walking for a few minutes. The colors kept mixing shapes you could kind of make out, but none of them were pleasant. After his long walk, Fry found a picture on the ground. It was completely out of place in his new environment. It looked like something drawn in the normal Futurama style. It was a photo of himself, Leela, and Bender. Fry looked at it for a few seconds before beginning to cry again. The picture soon turned to dust, and Fry continued walking. So I feel like this is kind of having the Ed, Edd and Eddy creepypasta problem of really cool, bizarre visuals that are very expressive and emotional. And I think these are kind of hitting on an emotional trigger. Like, I can feel this, like, I can feel the depression and the moodiness of it, but I feel as though it would be better if it was actually animated and it didn't have anything to do with Futurama. If it was just its own original thing, its own original visuals and all of this kind of stuff, the way everything is described is cool. But the story itself doesn't really make any sense. And it's close to being over, and we haven't gotten an explanation as to why our narrator has seen this. Very Twilight Zone, if that makes any sense. Like, there was finally time kind of getting that vibe. The view zoomed out until Fry couldn't be seen until the colors all blended together and turned to solid black. The view continued to zoom out, and we see that the black was a tiny fragment of the pupil of Fry's eye. Okay, very surreal, very 2001: A Space Odyssey. His frozen body had fallen out of the freezing unit and was lying in an abandoned room. He was drawn into the same hyper-realistic style as Dead Bart's corpse from the Simpsons episode Dead Bart, which replaced Moaning Lisa. Bender and Leela walked into the room. They saw what Fry had done to himself, and Leela said, "He got what he deserved." Yeah. Okay. She checked her watch and said, "Looks like we need to leave for our next delivery." She took a knife out of her pocket and put it into a plain cardboard box and headed to the ship. Huh. That's weird. Because I didn't like most of this story. I didn't think it was good. But that's an interesting moment at the end. Again, feel as though the vestige of Futurama really isn't doing anything for the story. Isn't really helping it out in any significant way, other than being shorthand for for certain visuals. Otherwise, it's not serving a purpose. But, and like Bender isn't doing anything. It could be anyone. These three characters could be anyone. It doesn't need to be Fry, Bender, and Leela. But what is interesting is that last bit about Leela kind of orchestrating things in some way, or being complicit. That's kind of a thing where your mind's left to wander, and it's interesting. Her putting the knife, the pocket knife, the knife into the cardboard box, and shipping it out to someone so they can kill themselves again, is very surreal. There's kind of this aspect of, like, endorsing someone specifically, not like in general, but endorsing a certain person committing suicide, being like, yeah, Fry, the mistake you made is unforgivable, and you deserve to freeze yourself and die like that. The idea of not being wanted, there's some actual bizarrely effective emotional scenes here, but it's not trying to be successful in the way that most ashcan horror is, where you're trying to convince somebody that this is real. This story is full of cliches, and unabashed about that, and actually trying to just use those shorthands to get to some sort of emotional punch. And I think it actually hits in places, not completely successfully. I feel as though if this was more grounded as it was in Dead Bart, or not to toot my own horn, but in my version of Dead Bart, then it would be more successful. Speaking of which, if you enjoyed this, please hit that like button. I've done a video that I will link in the description, where I have one video where I rewrite Dead Bart and narrate it, to hopefully make it a little more grounded, maybe tone down some of the fanciful aspects of it, and give a more logical reason as to why our narrator would have a tape of this lost episode of The Simpsons. And then I have another video explaining why I'm such a fan of the story, Dead Bart, the original, and why I made the changes that I did in my version of the story. I'm a huge fan of Dead Bart. Was less a fan of this quite significantly, but I can still see that this is taking on some of the hallmarks of K.I. Simpson's writing, and maybe I'll read some other stuff written by K.I. Simpson in the future.